you're getting into a fighter, especially in combat, it is a serious thing. All of my combat missions in the F-18 were launched off the deck of a carrier. That is an unforgiving environment. From the inside of that cockpit, there's a lot going on, especially in war. It's a very busy, very demanding, very unforgiving job. It's all business. You finish the brief, you know what your mission is, you grab your flight gear, you go get dressed, you walk out to the jet, you pre-flight it, make sure it's ready to go, you climb up the ladder and strap in, and you blast out and you launch and you go fight your mission. My first memory of growing up, I was 5 years old. I moved to a town called El Toro, California, which is in Orange County. I luckily moved about a mile away from the Marine Corps' West Coast Fighter Base. So I remember pulling up with a little moving truck and, no joke, looking up and seeing fighter planes coming into the air base. And that was the start of my long dream to become a fighter pilot, really because I moved to El Toro. As soon as I started to show an interest in airplanes, both my parents are super supportive, but my mom took me to the El Toro Air Show every single year.
Your United States Air Force and the 58th Tactical Training Wing of the Tactical Air Command would like to welcome you to El Toro Marine Corps Air Station.
I would see Marines all over town. People would be wearing Marine Corps t-shirts. Marines would be at the gas stations. When I looked through my eyes at a young age, Marines seemed to me to be different than the other services. The Marine Corps was the only service where you weren't in the service, you were the service. If you were in the Marine Corps, you were a Marine. And then, of course, in 1986, I'm 13 years old, the movie Top Gun comes out.
I feel the need for speed. Ow!
I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you that I watched the movie Top Gun and looked on that screen and saw planes shooting missiles and landing on boats and saying, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Within about a year or two of that, I discovered that Marines flew planes on boats. And so all these things that matter to me, being a Marine, flying airplanes, being on a ship, I found out I could combine all those things at once. I came to the conclusion that no matter what I ended up doing, I had to be a Marine, and that's the path that I chose.
Okay, he's getting ready, sir. Legs, breath, go after him. He's going to 5. He's only going to 5. Okay, good job. Remember, squeeze your butt. Go after him, sir. Shoot him down. He's going all the way to 8. Get on him, sir. Shoot him down. Squeeze that butt. Legs. Slow your breathing down a little bit. And follow him down. Follow him down.
The centrifuge is a good time. The centrifuge is this big giant machine, and all it does is spin around in a circle really, really fast. And what it does is replicate the G-forces you feel in a jet. It's really a training tool to make sure you learn the techniques and the maneuvers, so when you feel real G in a fighter, you don't pass out. So when you're under G-forces or Gs, what happens is this huge strain on your body, and this strain on your body actually takes the blood from your brain and your head and pulls it out and tries to push it down into your legs. And if the blood leaves your brain, you pass out, which is not good in a fighter jet. The centrifuge is a training tool to teach you how to keep that from happening. As you're under these different G-forces, you're looking over your shoulder in one technique, you're looking straight ahead in another technique, and they're all just filming and evaluating how well you do this to see if you're capable of straining under these Gs. The worst part about it is, like, you can't talk, your face gets all contorted, you look awful. But it's actually, if you do it well and you get through it, it's a really good thing because you learn the technique, but it also ends up being a lot of fun. Despite how violent and difficult it can be. Not very flattering, but also teaches you an incredibly important skill, which is staying awake while you're flying a fighter jet, which can be a really, really challenging thing in real life. The first time I was in a jet, I was at an F-18 squadron in El Toro, as actually what was called a stash. Now, all a stash is someone who's waiting to start flight training. And even before flight school, I got a ride in the back of an F-18. Other than the fact that it was like the coolest thing ever, it just motivated me even more to be successful enough to go back there, which I eventually did, to fly fighters in the front seat that time more officially, but I do remember that first backseat ride. Flying fighters on the surface is obviously a really fun job. It is a cool thing to do, without a doubt, and I have such fond memories, but flying fighters is hard. Being especially a single-seat fighter pilot where the responsibility of every single thing that happens on an aircraft is yours and yours alone is a very intense, very demanding, very challenging job. On the inside, it is violent. It is violent. And when you're trying to fly an airplane at 9 Gs and maneuver it in a really, really detailed manner, that can be a really hard thing to do. Things move really, really fast in a fighter jet.
Whether you're dogfighting or it's air to ground, even if you're just doing low altitude training and you're moving at 450 knots at just a couple hundred feet above the ground, that's a lot of information, and it's coming at you really fast.
Oftentimes you're flying at supersonic speeds, 500, 600, 700 miles an hour. The people you're fighting against are doing the same thing, so closure rates, how quickly you move towards each other, how quick information is presented to you that you have to react to is really, really fast. It is an intense job. There's also a ton of information you have to absorb. What's going on around you, what your wingmen are doing, what the enemy is doing, what the environment is like, threats on the ground.
You get down a little lower, you're not gonna look inside the cockpit anymore. The ground has 100% win rate. You've got to prioritize making sure you know where the ground is all the time.
In the relatively short time frame of flying a sortie, which might be an hour or something like that, it's a very intense experience because very shortly after you take off and you get into the actual fight, dude, it can be really, really busy. And so it's not uncommon to come back from a relatively short sortie. You are drenched in sweat, you are exhausted, your brain is tired, you've worked really, really hard. And so from the outside, of course, it's a fun job, it's a really cool job, I highly recommend it. But from the inside of that cockpit, there's a lot going on, especially in war, especially in intense training like a Top Gun. It's a very busy, very demanding, very unforgiving job, and it is an intense experience. So carrier landings never become routine, but you do get pretty comfortable with them, especially during the day. And after a while, once your confidence builds up and you realize that you can land a plane on a boat, the daytime carrier landings turn out to be kind of fun. You're really interested in how well you can do it. You get a little aggressive there, you like to come in faster than normal. And daytime landings, especially in good weather, are really about one of the most enjoyable things you can do in fighter aviation. They're a really good time. Nighttime landings are always kind of terrible for the most part. So nobody ever really enjoys flying at night. But the information that's presented to you, the light signals, the carrier deck, you get used to it, you get comfortable with it, and you know you're capable of doing it. Every now and then, there's an environment around the carrier that's not that common, but most carrier aviators, at least once in their career, are gonna experience something close to it. It's something we call 0-0. And all 0-0 means is that the clouds are at 0 feet, meaning the clouds are on the ground, and the amount of visibility you have, how far you can see, is essentially 0 feet as well. You're landing, and you're gonna be blind the entire time. The weather was so bad, the weather conditions were so poor that in order for the landing officer, the landing signal officer on the carrier to see the airplane, they needed that really, really bright light in your nose to be turned on. And the way they say that is 99 taxi lights on. All airplanes that hear this, turn on your taxi lights. So a 0-0 landing at night on the carrier with the taxi light on is a terrifying experience. All carrier landings, you do what's called transitioning to a visual landing, which means you're not using the flight instruments anymore, you're not reading your gauges, you're looking out for the meatball, that series of lights that shows you where you are. But I was landing in a snowstorm, and the fog was so thick, the clouds are so thick, and the snow was so thick that I couldn't see out my windshield and see the flight deck of the aircraft carrier. The landing signal officer could see my landing light at about a half a mile, which is about 7 or 8 seconds from landing. And so I flew these instruments all the way down to about a half a mile where I'd normally be looking at the flight deck. I had to let him know I couldn't see anything. He made 2 real short calls. He said, put a little power in, turn your jet to the right a tiny bit. And about a second before I landed on the flight deck, I picked up the landing area, slammed into the flight deck, caught a wire, and trapped and landed on the flight deck. and realizing that I did that without being able to see anything, which is not a testament to me. It's a testament to the people on the flight deck that were able to coordinate and communicate and move my jet through looking at that taxi light to get me aboard in what will go down as probably the top 2 most terrifying things that ever happened to me in an airplane is the 0-0 landing at night in a carrier in a snowstorm. Not a good time.
For those of you who don't know, it's you're learning how to dogfight mano a mano against another guy in another plane, like stock car racing, because the planes are equal. They go towards each other at a certain altitude, certain distance away from each other. They pass at 1,000 feet, left wing to left wing. And then once they pass, they say, what do you say? Game on?
Fights on.
Fights on. Getting selected to go to Top Gun is on the list of just, I can't believe this is happening to me experiences. And when you're climbing up the ladder, strapping into the cockpit by yourself and buckling yourself in, there's a component of that I never get tired of.
I remember being in the parking lot when someone told me. I was like, holy crap, like he did it. Hearing that he was gonna get that opportunity, that he had earned that opportunity was such a big deal that here, to this day, I remember where I was when I heard it.
First of all, Top Gun is just a school. It's just a school to teach you how to fly fighters at a high level. They try to demystify the uniqueness of it that comes from the movie and the fame that goes along with it, that is an actual school to teach you to fly airplanes and to instruct in that jet. The process for getting there, in some ways, isn't all that unique. Each squadron typically gets to send 1 pilot a year to Top Gun. That's kind of how the math works out. Sometimes if you're deployed, they'll send no in 1 year and 2 in the next. But it kind of works out, they're gonna send 1 person a year. And you have to be doing well in your squadron to get it.
You know you're a student, and you know you're not gonna be as good as the instructors, but what you don't know is that you're not just gonna lose or get annihilated, you're not even gonna know what happened. It's gonna be over and you're gonna kind of be flying back, and before you're gonna land, and you're not gonna be able to explain what just occurred. I mean, the very first fight of the first flight, it was over in like 20 seconds, and I knew right then I was totally in over my head. It was so bad that when I landed, and I'm in my gear, and you're supposed to get undressed out of your flight gear and go, he's like, hey, don't get undressed. He's like, why don't we just go do that again? It was bad enough that we didn't even need to talk about it. We just needed to just, hey, and he's like, hey, why don't you just take a deep breath, man. And we went and did that flight without ever even talking about the first one.
Now, I went to Top Gun, I did some combat deployments, and Top Gun as a school populates the schoolhouse with instructors that have already finished the course. And I was very fortunate that at the end of my time as a student there, I'd done well enough where the staff decided to invite me back to be an instructor. That's a phone call you don't ever forget. And of course, you feign your excitement. You go, oh, thank you, sir, I really appreciate that. I'd absolutely love to take that experience and go back to Top Gun. But in the back of your mind, you're like, are you kidding me? It's like the coolest phone call in the world.
I had planned and executed a dozen major combat operations with Dave Berke. I had no idea what his background was. I just knew he was a pilot, and it was great for him to talk to the aircraft, but he was incredibly humble. He never led with his resume. He never talked about his experiences. And we were probably a dozen missions in before somebody made a snide comment about Top Gun or dropped a Top Gun movie quote, and I realized, oh, Dave must have gone to Top Gun. I think I asked him about it. He just kind of acknowledged it or shrugged it off. I had no idea that he had been the lead Top Gun instructor. So not only had he been to Top Gun, which only a handful of Navy and Marine fighter pilots ever get to go to, but he'd then been hand-selected as the lead Top Gun instructor, one of only a handful in the history of the Top Gun program.
Being an instructor at Top Gun is probably the best job, certainly at that stage in a career, that you could possibly have. Your only job is to fly fighters and teach other people how to do it. It is an unbelievably great place to teach and train and fly jets. In fact, I did more tactical flying in those 3 years than at any other job because I didn't have other responsibilities. Top Gun is an absolute schoolhouse. It is there to teach people how to fight the airplane and how to teach other people how to fight the airplane. Literally, the month I showed up to Top Gun, they started retraining Top Gun instructors on the F-16. They hadn't had F-16s at Top Gun in well over a decade, and I was in the very first class of Marine instructors to learn to fly the F-16s. So without any expectation, I'm now gonna get qualified in 2 different airplanes, the F-18 and the F-16. Dude, the F-16 is what an awesome airplane. There's some things about the F-16 that are remarkable and certainly better than what I experienced in the F-18. The first is, it is a powerful, fast airplane. Now, the Hornet is not slow by any means, but the F-16 is, certainly at the time I was flying it, a uniquely fast, uniquely powerful jet. It has the best view in fighter aviation. When you sit in the cockpit of that airplane, you can't see 1 inch of that jet. You can look in any direction, see the ground, see the sky. There's nothing obscuring your view. It is the most beautiful view in the world. And there were times that I would literally fly out, do an F-18 sortie in the morning, finish my morning F-18 sortie, walk across the flight line, switch out my harness, climb up into an F-16, and fly my second sortie of the day in the F-16. Being dual qualified in the Hornet and the Viper was one of the best times of my life. What do I love about the Hornet? Man, you're kind of asking me to describe like your first love. I hold that airplane in such high regard, it's very hard for me to find flaws in that airplane. I loved a couple things specifically about that jet. One is that it is built thick and strong and powerful enough to land on an aircraft carrier, and yet at the exact same time, it is so nimble and so maneuverable and can be so light and so easy to move around. I also love that you could literally do any mission in the world in that jet. You could do air-to-air, fighting against other aircraft shooting missiles. You could drop bombs. You could do close air support. You could do reconnaissance. You could do really any mission set. It is a true, from birth, fighter and attack platform. And then, of course, you take that thing to the carrier, which is also in a really demanding environment. So the beautiful thing about the Hornet wasn't just any one particular thing. It's that that jet could really do literally everything that exists in combat and fighter aviation. I will love that jet my entire life. First, I have to acknowledge is how ridiculously lucky I am to have been the first and only Marine to ever fly that jet. You have to look at some just very good timing that I showed up at the right place and the right time where the Air Force wanted to have a Marine Corps exchange pilot to fly the Raptor. So I got to fly the Raptor for 4 years. It is impossible to overstate how unbelievably awesome that jet is. It is the best at everything it does as a fighter. It is the fastest, it is the most maneuverable, it is the most intimidating, it is the most intelligent. That jet is unbelievable. Flying the Raptor for those 4 years as a Marine, every single day I woke up, it was like I hit the lottery again. My first takeoff in the Raptor, I did all the simulators, all the training, I knew how the systems worked, but I had never felt the airplane before. And so my first flight in the F-22, you're by yourself. There's no 2-seat F-22 out there. You're a single seat from the beginning. And I remember taxiing out and taking the runway. And all you do really is you just plug in the afterburners and you take off like I'd done thousands of other times. But I'd never before experienced the full thrust takeoff of an F-22 Raptor, and it takes off so fast and launches in the air so quickly. It's very hard in the first several flights of the Raptor to keep up with it. It's 70,000 pounds of thrust. That thing is a beast. So I flew the F-35 as well. And if you're hearing this, you're realizing that I was probably the luckiest guy in the world to have flown 4 fighters operationally. I had well over 2,000 hours on the Hornet. I flew the Viper for 3 years. I flew the Raptor for almost 4 years. And I was lucky enough to be the very first Marine operational pilot in the F-35B, the first pilot ever qualified on that airplane, and then the commanding officer of the first squadron to fly it. So I had a lot of experience in the F-35. The F-35 is unlike any other plane in the world. If you are gonna go to war, and I've seen combat both in the air and on the ground, you wanna go in an F-35. There are capabilities in that machine. That airplane does things that it is hard to understand how an airplane can do those things. It certainly is a fighter in its truest sense. It flies very similar to the F-18 and the F-16. It's not the F-22 in terms of performance. But in terms of it telling you what's going on in the world, the array of weapons and capabilities you might use to assert your dominance in a highly contested battle space, which we fight in, the F-35 is the machine to fly. There's an old adage in aviation, which I certainly subscribe to. It's true in a lot of ways. The saying is, speed is life, more is better. But I will very confidently tell you that in 21st century warfare, the only true adage is information is life, more is better. you have to know what's going on in the world. You have to understand what's happening on the battlefield. Not just you and your airplane, but all the other airplanes, all the people on the ground. The more you know what's happening, the more situational awareness you have, the better you are. There is more information at your fingertips in an F-35 than in any other machine in the world. And if you want to be successful on the battlefield, the F-35 is the plane to do it in.
I first met Dave Berke in Ramadi in April of 2006, right after I arrived into this total violent war zone. I deployed to Iraq before, but this was a very different environment.
I was there for about a month doing combat operations when a SEAL team showed up and they called themselves Task Unit Bruiser.
Unlike in my previous deployments, U.S. troops were getting wounded or killed every single day in Ramadi. This was the real deal. It was a total war zone. One of the top priorities for U.S. military force in Iraq was to try to take the city of Ramadi back from 3,000 to 5,000 insurgents that controlled the city of 400,000 people. And 2/3 of the geographic area of the city was Al-Qaeda and Iraq battle space. U.S. forces couldn't even penetrate into these areas without taking major casualties.
Americans were getting wounded, Americans were getting killed, and progress was not being made. What does that mean? It means we were losing.
We wanted to try to help and support the soldiers and Marines that were on the ground there. I very quickly learned that one unit that was doing that exceptionally well was Dave Berke and his Marines. Dave was one of those calming presence. He'd only been on the ground for a month prior to me, and yet he'd done several dozen combat operations. He might as well have been there for years compared to my 0 combat operations in Ramadi at this point.
I volunteered after Top Gun to be a forward air controller to this unit called Anglico in Japan. What I thought that meant I was going to be doing is living in Japan for a year, being a forward air controller, which I thought was good because it was a really unique Marine Corps thing. The minute I got to Japan, they were asking for volunteers to leave the Japan Anglico unit and go to one in Camp Lejeune. And within a matter of months of me starting this Japan deployment, I was actually back in the United States prepping to go to Iraq.
I remember the day he left like it was yesterday. It was horrible, sad. I was terrified, again, because I obviously had no idea what was going to happen and I never experienced that before.
I left for my FAC tour 3 months after I'd gotten married. I spent 19 of the first 27 months of my marriage deployed.
Dave was what we call a J-TAC, which is a Joint Terminal Attack Controller. That's a forward air controller, somebody that's talking to aircraft. I had no idea what the background was that got him to Ramadi, where I met Dave and we started working together. I had no idea that he was one of the absolute best pilots in the world. He could have chosen any command that he wanted to go to. He could have led any fighter squadron, and yet he volunteered for a ground forward air control duty. And of all the places in Iraq that he could have been sent to, he chose Ramadi.
Our team was called SALT 6, Supporting Arms Liaison Team. Also, we were referred as Lightning 6-1. We were a 13-man team of Marines and a Navy corpsman. Our job was to embed with Army, Navy, and Marines units to provide air support.
What Dave and his team were doing was providing cover from the high ground, from tens of thousands of feet overhead, from fixed-wing aircraft like F-18s or Marine Harriers, or even rotary-wing aircraft like Apache gunships. When we patrolled in these incredibly dangerous areas where thousands of hardcore jihadi fighters controlled these neighborhoods, we could do that knowing that Dave could talk to those aircraft and bring their big guns into bear to bail us out when we got in trouble. And they did that all the time.
It's something that's very unique that the Marine Corps does, which is take pilots from the air and put them on the ground. And they've done this for a long time. All of a sudden, you've got someone that speaks the language of the people that are in the sky. We get taught that language, we're not fluent in that language. When you've got someone like Dave Berke, that is their first language. They explain things to the aircraft overhead that we wouldn't be able to explain as well. It's very beneficial at a minimum, and in a worst case scenario, it can save lives.
You could not get a more different environment from the cockpit of a fighter to being on the ground in Iraq, getting shot at in 115-degree heat, carrying 100 pounds of gear. There is no starker difference in how to fight a war than those two places. The middle of summer in Iraq, maneuvering on the ground, all sorts of different environments. That's a very different experience when bullets are going past your head, bombs are going off in close proximity to you, mortars are detonating. Very, very different environment, and something it took me, to be honest with you, it took me some time to figure out how to get used to that.
I can only imagine how far outside of his comfort zone Dave was. He was a great pilot, and I'm sure he was super comfortable in the cockpit of a jet flying around. And yet, here he was, he and his Marines, carrying rifles, carrying 100-pound rucksacks, slugging along with us, coming in off of boats or riding in vehicles, and then foot patrolling into these highly dangerous areas with bullets flying around and RPG rockets sailing past us. And he did that over and over and over again.
The op tempo for Task Unit Bruiser in Ramadi was there was almost always some element of Task Unit Bruiser in the field. Once the operation reaches a certain threshold of either risk level or complexity, we would then look to augment our SEALs with other units. He was a person that we could work with. He's a person we could count on. We could count on his team, and that's how the relationship started.
I probably did 50 major combat operations with Dave and his Marines where they plugged into our element and were a part of our patrol. And so they'd sit in our mission planning brief, we'd go out and do some rehearsals together, and then we'd jock up in our gear and we'd launch on these operations.
About halfway through the deployment in our time in Iraq, we had transitioned to a series of missions setting up combat outposts.
Instead of going out into the enemy-controlled territories and grabbing one or two bad guys and capturing or killing one or two bad guys and then going back to base, this idea of seize, clear, hold, and build meant going into these enemy-controlled territories and staying there.
And what we really started to do was operate from inside the city where the enemy stronghold was.
So we ended up setting up what we called sniper overwatch positions, 200, 300, maybe 400 meters away from the combat outpost as it was being built. And while it was being built, when the enemy would maneuver in to attack those friendly positions, we would interdict and eliminate the enemy.
One of the biggest operations into downtown Ramadi was going into an area where there had been 0 U.S. forces present. It was an area where we knew that 100 enemy fighters could muster, attack our position, and potentially overrun us and kill everybody. I approached Dave and his guys and said, here's what's going on. A U.S. Marine element had tried to push down the major road in a stretch of less than 500 yards that hit something like 13 different IEDs. So we decided to take boats in. Dave looked at me and said, we're in, we're going with you. And so our SEALs, Iraqi soldiers, and Dave Berke and his Marines, we jumped on the boats. We came in at nighttime, very slowly, very quietly.
We all got night vision on. All you can see is our lasers, being pointed around. And I thought to myself, I was like, man, we are at the cradle of civilization with Navy SEALs. I literally stuck my hand out, touched the water because I couldn't believe I was there.
They dropped us off on the bank and we foot patrolled into the city center. We engaged an enemy fighter on the way in. We took down the buildings that would later become the combat outposts where the Army would establish a permanent position along with their Iraqi soldiers. I can only imagine for Dave and his Marines that was way out of their comfort zone, and it was awesome because the bad guys had absolutely no idea we were there.
It was a really dangerous, really violent, really aggressive strategy that required us to sit and live inside the city.
Dave and his radio men were right there next to me on the rooftop, talking to aircraft overhead, supporting us while we waited for the mine clearance teams to slowly make their way down those roads.
I remember having multiple aircraft on station, AC-130s, Harriers, F-18s. I believe that day we had almost every single aircraft on station.
Jocko and our headquarters element arrived along with the battalion leadership, and now there were hundreds of soldiers clearing buildings all around us. We realized we couldn't do a lot for these soldiers and Marines that were pushing out into the blocks around the buildings that we were sitting in the sniper overwatch position. So we pushed about 350 yards down the street outside of the Army's defensive perimeter.
Literally started, bounding from street to street, just nonstop moving.
Took down a 4-story apartment building, set our snipers up in place, and were able to disrupt a bunch of major attacks that happened on the combat outpost. The trouble was, we proved to be so effective that we had to extend for another 24 hours beyond what we'd planned. It was brutally hot, so guys are burning through water. We burned through MREs, or our meal ready to eat, our food sources. And we also started running low on ammo, and we needed resupply.
The SEALs were to essentially load up a stretcher filled with these heavy water jugs, and they were gonna sprint these several hundred yards down the road to get into this building. And I'm the guy who's coordinating the aircraft, but I also have to provide cover for them because they can't carry and use their weapons while they're doing this, what we call the stretcher run.
We grabbed a stretcher and we ran down the street with an empty stretcher as fast as we could. This is broad daylight. We navigated through the concertina wire and past the tanks and back to the combat outpost. We loaded down the stretcher with as much gear as we could possibly carry. We jocked back up in our gear, we grabbed that stretcher, and this thing weighed hundreds of pounds at this point with all the water and food and ammunition, and we sprinted out the gate of Cop Falcon as fast as we possibly could go.
And I'm doing my best to keep up with these SEALs who are in a flat sprint. And I remember the entire time as I'm running, I'm using my weapon to cover some enemy that are pointed at us from the north.
We were huffing and puffing as fast as we could go in all our combat gear, weapon in one hand, other hand on the stretcher. And I looked over at Dave, his eyes were about this big, but we were just thinking that every step we're about to get our head shot off.
I think when we got to that building and entered it, it was probably the most tired I'd ever been in my entire life. And really what it did is speak volumes to just how fit, strong, and capable the SEALs were.
It was definitely a gut check. It was a serious physical evolution. Luckily, we made it back the 350 yards. I looked at Dave, and he looked back at me with a big smile of relief on his face. We laughed about it, but I got the impression that he probably was not too interested in doing that again.
It's certainly a highlight of my career, and it spoke to the bond that I had with Lace Platoon and those SEALs and my Anglico team had. We were close. We were certainly brothers, and on one of the more dangerous things I ever did, I did it with those Navy SEALs.
He'll forget his kids' names before he forgets that up.
June 20th, 2006, one of the worst days of my entire life was the day that we lost Chris Leon. Chris was my radio operator. He was on my team. He was one of the 13 Marines I was responsible for. He worked in one of the 3 firepower teams that I led. Chris had been a fixture of all the main operations we had done with all the SEALs and all the main operations we'd done in the middle of the city in the summer of 2006 at the absolute height of the most violent insurgency we had ever faced, certainly in a generation and definitely in our time in Iraq.
We worked with SALT 6 all the time, and one of the young Marines we worked with all the time was Corporal Chris Leon, who was a motivated young Marine, eager to participate, eager to support, eager to help, and was just a great guy. On that first major combat operation where we put in the combat outpost Iron in the town of Springfield on the southern edge of Ramadi, Chris and his team had taken position on the rooftop of Cop Iron.
Chris's job was to provide what we called overwatch, which meant he was protecting from the top of a roof teams that were on the ground operating. I was back at what was called the Operations Center. That was a main operating area from which we moved into the city. And oftentimes we'd be in the city for sometimes hours or days. But we always came back in a certain period of time inside this Operations Center to get new missions, plan those missions, and coordinate. And so I was back at the Operations Center planning and coordinating the next mission while Chris was with his team on a current mission. And we had radios and we would coordinate with each other, and we had young Marines that would man those radios, and every now and then in my senior leadership role, I'd get a call that was required for me. It was not uncommon, but it didn't happen all the time. And I had a young Marine walk into essentially my office, which was really just a makeshift bedroom where I had my laptop planning a mission. And I knew by the look on his face that something was wrong. And he said, "Sir, there's a call for you on the radio. I think you need to come get this."
I went up to the rooftop of Cop Iron before we departed just to assess the area, to get a look at it in the daytime from a good vantage point. And so when I was up there, the Army had security positions that they were building on the rooftop, and they also had the Marines from SALT 6 I checked in with those Marines from Salt 6, had a conversation with Chris and several of his teammates, and then we went down the stairwell, loaded up in our vehicles, and we took off. And I learned just a few minutes after that conversation, Chris Leon was hit by an enemy sniper round and killed.
That 15-yard walk from my room with the laptop where I'm planning a mission to where the radio was a very long, painful walk, because I knew I was gonna get some bad news. I didn't know what that news was, but I knew it wasn't gonna be good. I could tell by the look on his face. And when I got on the radio, Chris's boss called me and said, "Hey, sir, we're coming in. Chris has been hit. We'll meet you at Charlie Medical," which was the medical facility on the base that we were operating. He didn't have a lot of other detail, but I knew I had a Marine on my team that had been shot. I don't think I fully understood the severity of it, at least at first, but I knew it was a really bad situation. When he got there, he was in the back of something called a Bradley fighting vehicle, which basically is a big tank. And the back of the tank has a big door that drops down like a ramp. And inside this vehicle, when Chris was brought down the ramp in a stretcher, I could tell immediately the moment he came down on the stretcher that Chris was dead. There's an entrance wound on his temple. His gear had been cut off and removed, and I knew immediately that Chris was gone. And in that moment was a moment I certainly won't forget, but it shattered whatever little optimism I had that things weren't as bad as I thought they were. And I had to acknowledge that a Marine that I was responsible for was gone.
There was guys getting killed almost every day there. And the world didn't stop. The world didn't stop when someone got killed. The world carried on. The operations carried on. So when Chris Leon got killed, Dave Berke had to carry on. He still had to go in the field. When Mark Lee got killed, we still had to go in the field. When Mikey Mansour got killed, we still had to go in the field. So what did I observe about Dave Berke when he lost one of his brothers and one of his men that he was responsible for? What did I observe? I observed that Dave Berke carried on with his mission. And all that pain, he put it in check and showed up at the next brief and was ready to do his job.
For me, when I came home from war, and I came home with an unexpected burden that neither of us thought I was going to have, and that burden of not coming home with Chris, knowing that I lost a Marine, that put a weight on me that I didn't understand and didn't expect, and I don't think she did either. I think a natural relationship between a husband and a wife is you lean on each other, you take care of each other, you provide things the other person doesn't have, and I think that's normal and natural, and it's a wonderful thing. But what was remarkable about that is that I got home and I started to reveal some of the challenges of losing a Marine in combat. I was having nightmares. I was certainly not myself. I was struggling with coming back to an environment by which I wasn't looking for roadside bombs. I wasn't worried about getting shot at, and I was having a hard time reacclimating to normal life. We had been married for just a couple of months before I left, so she and I didn't really even have an understanding of how we were going to be as a couple. And what that did is it put an unbelievable amount of pressure and stress and challenge on her. She was forced to share this burden with me that she had no context for, no understanding of. Why she was even willing to be able to do that is remarkable, because it was nothing that she expected. When we met, life was fun. I was a Top Gun instructor. We were having a good time. We spent our time skiing and going out to dinner and then partying and having a great time. Next thing you know, she's got a husband that's coming home, waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, having nightmares about combat. And what Whitney did, which to me is understated as it sounds, is the most remarkable thing, is Whitney listened. She just listened to what was wrong, to what I was hearing, what I was feeling, what I was thinking, what I was dealing with. And just to be able to have an outlet for someone who wasn't judging me, who wasn't trying to give me a solution, who wasn't trying to pretend that she understood, but she was just able to listen, taught me that the skill of listening is really, really important. And what her listening to me allowed me to do was be less embarrassed, to be less insecure about exposing myself of these terrible things, these things that are embarrassing. Nightmares are embarrassing. When you wake up with a nightmare and you're sweating and you're holding back tears, it's a hard thing to show to another person, and she had no judgment of that, and she was willing to see me at my worst. Her ability to listen to me is something I started to follow her lead on. I started to mimic that, and I started listening to myself, and instead of rejecting these frustrations that I was having and pushing back against them, I started to embrace them more, and I think she is really central to how quickly I recovered and returned back to normalcy. It took some time, but without her, I think it would have taken much longer. She was central to that, and I'm eternally grateful for how willing she was able to do that, and also what she taught me along the way. As soon as I came home in the fall of 2006 after that deployment, one of the very first things I did is I took my wife to go see Kathy, which is Chris's mom, to share the moment of our face-to-face encounter. And I know the word surreal gets thrown around quite a bit. That's the definition to me of a surreal moment, where I'm entering the living room of the home of a mother, of a man who did not come home from war, who I was responsible for. I met neighbors, I met friends, his niece, his dog, saw pictures on the wall. All the things that normalized life of a parent raising a child were all still there in that room. I can't tell you what an incredible human being Kathy was, because despite the fact that she had lost her son in war, and despite the fact that she endured probably the most painful thing a parent can ever endure, which is the loss of your child. Chris was 21 when he was killed. All Kat wanted to do was ask how I was doing and thank me for my service and see if I was okay and hug me and tell me how much she loved me. And it's remarkable at how generous she was towards me when I felt the full weight of responsibility for the loss of her son. She still was able to put me ahead of anything else, which I still consider to say incredibly remarkable. I have a very close relationship with Kat. And of course, there is a small part in the back of my mind that wishes she was a stranger. I wish I didn't know Kat, and I wish she didn't know me, because that would have meant Chris came home and he went on to live his life. But that's not true. That's not the case. Kat and I are very, very close. She is a part of my family. She is a part of my life. My son is Matthew Leon Berke. I named my son after Chris, and his last name is my son's namesake. Kat is an aunt, a family member, someone who is a part of every major event in our lives, and I'm as close to her as anybody in the world. And despite how much I wish that wasn't the case, I am very, very thankful to have Kat in my life, and I think she would tell you she's thankful to have me too. The burden of leadership is something that I embrace. Obviously, I've had some tough experiences losing a Marine in combat, the challenges that go along with the difficult environments of what leadership brings sometimes. In the end, the best part about embracing your responsibility of leadership is you have the chance to positively impact the people around you, the ability to help people. And sometimes that's helping with the smallest, most menial task. I get to help my kids with their homework sometimes. And other times I get to lead Marines through the most difficult environment in the world, which is combat, and then everything in between. But what binds all those things together, despite how different those environments are, is when you accept the responsibility of leadership, in no matter whatever role it is, you embrace the opportunity to help people, to give them control, to give them the ability to influence the outcome of their lives, which is the most important thing I think a person can do.
You know, Dave pushes himself hard, and he has high expectations of the people around him, but his goal is always about the team. His goal is always about for other people to succeed.
So I retired after 23 years in the Marine Corps, and fortunately, I had the best career transition in the history of the military, which was I left the best job in the world and got to start the best job in the world.
Dave really recognized the impact that we could have in people's lives, not only helping them solve problems at work and helping them be more efficient and effective at what they were trying to do in their professional careers, but in their home life, with their spouse and with their kids and with their families and in their communities. I think Dave very quickly understood the power of what we were teaching. You know, he read Extreme Ownership, he understood those concepts, and he was all in.
So right now, Dave is the Chief Development Officer at Echelon Front. He oversees the curriculum, he oversees the academy, our online training academy, and he oversees the instructors as they go out into the field and teach these principles.
As a leadership instructor at Echelon Front, I'm back with the SEALs that I deployed to Iraq with, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, and with this incredible team whose sole responsibility is to take the lessons we learned from these awful experiences in combat, where we lost Marines and we lost SEALs and we had major sacrifices that all led to learning the most important leadership lessons in the world that apply everywhere in life. As a spouse, as a parent, as a member of my community, as a business leader, as a frontline employee, in any role you could possibly imagine, I'm now in a position where I get to work at a company that teaches the lessons we learned to help everybody in any situation in their life to recognize that every single problem they're dealing with is a leadership problem. Leadership is the solution to every problem, and if they want to be successful, they need to lead. And I get to do that every single day.
Yo, get the speaker box loud, hitting that stuff till you hearing that sound.